A lot of YouTube channels show you how to build stuff, and sometimes they show you the problems they encounter when they built the stuff. But what they don't ever show you is the thought process that it takes to figure out how to build it. Probably because it's boring, but that's not. The reason I'm doing this is because so many people have commented and left great information and ideas on my striker from Fallout, and I wanted to talk about what it takes to actually be able to build it. So I'm going to show you what my plan is for this thing in the future instead of just making sparks with this thing and welding stuff together. I forgot in the last video to tell you this Lennox blade is doing awesome. This has definitely lasted longer than a couple of blades would have, and I don't know if it's going to last 30, but it won't take that many to add up to the cost of this. The idea for this project started when my friend Dylan told me about these constant force springs. Now these things are awesome, and really the whole idea behind this was built around these. So my decision to use all this metal to build a rail system for this sled came because I knew that these things retain a huge amount of momentum and they put out a lot of force. Really dangerous. And 80 pounds constant isn't that much, but when you think about the weight and the power behind these, if they let go or anything happens, basically they can kill you. It's probably the reason why I had such a hard time getting these. I had one company tell me no after I told them what I was going to build. Dangerous. I had one company tell me I needed a minimum order if I wanted these interwound to get like 80 pounds of force on each side instead of 40. Really dangerous. And that was going to be outrageously expensive, so I didn't do that. Not worth it. And I finally found a company that had a minimum order that wasn't very expensive so that I could just order a couple. And I had to get 4 to be able to reach that minimum. So now I have these 2 extras. And I have these which are coming off. Let me explain why. So remember in part 1 when I used the tape measure analogy so that you could understand how these springs work? That accelerates as it comes back in. Now if I pull a tape measure out to here and I let it back in, it gets moving pretty fast. But if I pull it the whole way out to there, obviously there's other physics forces working on it, but it doesn't get moving that much faster. I don't know if this is an accurate term or not, but I'm going to call it terminal retract rate. So when that thing goes shooting back in, you've got that spring that needs to coil back up inside there. Obviously mine doesn't have as many coils as this because it doesn't come out as far and it's not nearly as small, you know. The point is, once you're working with these constant force springs, once they start to spin so fast from retracting, they start to lose force. They can only move so quick. Now I knew this was going to be an issue, but I didn't know how much. I was hoping with these things being this big and this strong, it would be fast enough that it wouldn't even matter and a bowling ball would shoot off of the end as fast as I wanted to. But obviously it didn't. And a big part of that was the fact that I was using a 15-pound bowling ball. And a whole bunch of you in the comments said that I should use a lighter bowling ball. And I got 2 more bowling balls, and these things are 6 pounds, not 15. These will definitely shoot farther than the 15-pound ball, but I'm pretty sure I'm approaching the terminal retract rate, so all that work I did to get these on there is gonna get thrown out the window. Part of the reason I'm giving up on these so quickly is because a fan of my channel, Enrico, emailed me and he sent me this picture. This has all the math written out for how far I could potentially shoot a bowling ball without regards to the weight of the sled, the friction involved, or the fact that these constant force springs lose force as you approach their terminal retract rate. With that answer, I knew it wasn't going to shoot as far or as fast as I'd like it to with these, so I knew it was time to change gears. I had a feeling this might happen from the start of this project, so I did have a backup plan. And since this thing is more or less a giant complicated slingshot, rubber. Let me show you its features. This is the standard latex rubber tubing that you can get at hardware stores. And this is for spear guns. Guess which one is stronger? But since I got some of each type of rubber, I can try to tune this thing to have the amount of power that I want, or the amount of power that I can pull back without it breaking or hurting me, killing me. Really dangerous. The point is, you can get a huge amount of force out of these things. It stretches out to like 4 times its normal length. So the reason I'm doing something like this instead of pneumatics is because I don't have the money to be able to buy the stuff that you can launch things with pneumatics. Not worth it. I don't even know where you get that stuff. Plus pneumatics in general cost a fortune. Really expensive. At least compared to rubber. Even the regulation system that I have for the CO2 tank that I put on the Power Fist was really expensive because of the adapter and the regulator and the fitting that I had to get that adapts to the other fitting that I had to get that carries it there. And then when you use pneumatics, even if you get the inexpensive stuff, it doesn't have enough flow rate to be able to accelerate something quickly with it, because if you don't have enough flow, you can't build any pressure in the thing, and then it doesn't move very fast. And it still has to be portable. I can just not do this stuff and use rubber instead because it's cheap. These are the things you have to consider that'll run through your head when you're trying to envision what you're gonna build and try to make sure it stays under budget at the same time. Now this stuff's from a spear gun, but I don't want to do the typical setup the spear gun has where your rubber's just mounted at the front and you pull it back, because I've got all this rubber that's unused where I could be accelerating the bowling ball still. I want to use the whole track. So with the rubber attached up here, if I stretch it back to here and I let that shoot it, I have all this area at the front where it has basically no force on it. And the pulleys will allow me to keep tension on this thing the whole way. Obviously it's going to reduce when it gets to the front, but here's my idea. Basically I'll have an attachment point at the front and the back of the rail system. And then I'll have one pulley on the front of the rail system and one pulley on the sled. My spear gun tubing will be attached at the back of the rail, and then it'll loop up around the first pulley or roller on the front of the rail, then around the roller or pulley on the sled, and then to the attachment point on the rail. If I do it this way, when it's drawn back the whole way, it'll be stretched out to 3 times its normal length. But this stuff stretches out to like 4 times its original length, at least. So I can put a bunch of preload on this stuff and it'll still have some force when it gets to the front instead of next to none. And then I can just put as many bands on as I feel safe doing. And with the pulleys, I've got double the power because the bands are, you know, doubled up on it. This strap right here has a brake strength of 400 pounds. As long as I don't exceed that, I should be okay. And if I do, I could just get a stronger one, but I don't really want to go past 400 pounds because even if I use the 6-pound ball, and a lot of you said this, when it shoots, it's going to kick 400 pounds of force even into all this mass that's going to be sitting on my shoulders, probably going to hurt. Now this is where the rubber meets the road, or the pulley in this case. And it brings me to a previous problem that people mentioned in the first part of this build. I used high molecular weight plastic sliders inside of my sled. Inside of my sled. There we go. But my initial idea was to use ball bearings. So I realized that when I go to try to put these inside of the tubes on top to make this roll very freely on the rail, it would be extremely difficult to get these mounted inside. And not only that, I'd need some on the bottom also, because it has to hold the rail from the top and bottom and from the sides. So I'd end up having a huge amount of work and time invested in trying to get these bearings mounted in this thing to hold it from all angles so that it would roll straight down and it wouldn't wear through the aluminum brackets that I put on the side or something, you know? Too difficult. And that's why I used plastic. But since I've got a whole bunch of these little jobbies now, I can use them to make the pulleys. Now talk is cheap. A lot of people come up with ideas for how to build stuff, but making it happen is where it matters. My buddy Dylan that had the idea for the constant force springs on the bowling ball launcher made his own. Totally different design, and it was like a light version because he made it to shoot a kickball. So what do you do when you have an idea and nobody makes the part that you need to be able to put it together? You make the part. So to make these pulleys, I need something that'll be able to hold enough bands on it. So I need the width. I can't use just a little skinny pulley. I found these PVC fittings, and I'm gonna use little pieces of PVC, and I'm gonna grind the inside out. I'm gonna slide this the whole way through. Once I've got this on the inside and it's glued in place, I can grind this down, grooved kind of, so that it holds the bands in place on the pulley. And then these don't fit inside, so I'll just heat these up and push these bearings in, and then I've got my little pulley system. And I just got some bolts that fit through my bearings. There's no instruction manual. You just gotta go to the store or look through your stuff that you have at your house and find the parts that you can modify to try to make work for what you're trying to do. This is the difficult part. You might be able to come up with all the ideas in the world, but if you don't have the tools or the ability to be able to make it, it doesn't really matter. So now that I've got this plan, how do I know that this isn't gonna fail also and I'll have to rebuild it a 3rd time? Well, I don't, but I have a pretty good idea that this is gonna work because of all the stuff that we talked about so far. So let's do a simple test and see how much power I'm gonna be able to get out of these things. This test is gonna tell me how much force 1 amber strand of latex rubber will give me. I have 1 inch marked. I'll stretch that out until it is 4 inches. Now obviously this is gonna stretch, so that mark will move. See, now it's at 2, and that one's almost at 4, and I have this baggage scale to give me an idea. So let's see how much this one does. So about right there. This says 11.7 pounds. All right, that time I think it was a little more accurate. It was 9 and 14, and it was just over 15 pounds. So I thought that this would stretch to 4 times its normal length, but it obviously can stretch to 5. And if it's stretched out 5 times its normal length, you get 15 pounds of force per strand. At 4 times, we're looking at right around 12. I think I had stretched a little over 4 times. Time for spear gun stuff test. All right, let's see what we can get. 16 at 4 times its length. That's about 6 times its length. 25. So apparently you can go 6 times. You probably do that with the other one, but it felt like it was gonna break, and this didn't. This still felt like it was plenty stretchy. So even though this isn't as strong as the constant force springs, and it doesn't have the terminal retract rate reduction in force, it does have a reduction in force because of stretch, but since I can stretch it to so much over its normal length, I can put a huge amount of preload on it. And I can stack these bands up and get as much force as I want without making it so dangerous that I'm afraid to shoot it. So as long as everything goes as planned, I should be able to whip a bowling ball pretty far. So now I just have a lot of work to do because I'm gonna build this thing. If you're not subscribed, you're probably gonna wanna do that because you're definitely gonna wanna see what this thing does in its final form. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. If the guy that sold me these bowling balls is watching, thanks a lot, because he gave me a screaming deal on them and a full set of pins so that I can go bowling.